Various forms of this question are the thing that I've been asked most since the coronavirus shut tennis down. So, now you get answers. Hey guys, welcome back to the tennis vlog. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, do that now before we get going. Obviously, the tennis tours have been frozen for a few months now. People are starting to get a bit bored. Some questionable talking points have been brought up as a result. One question that has circulated quite a bit is what this break could mean for the big four of tennis, which is Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, and Serena Williams. Gotcha. I am not the oracle, I cannot see the future, but I can look at the data and performances and history that we have available and make some educated guesses on how things might play out when the tours resume. Although I'm probably going to be as vague as possible because that's what I do. I'm going to start with Serena and Federer because I think, interestingly, there are a few things with these two that are very similar in this situation. Then I'll move on to Nadal and Djokovic. Starting then with Serena, and I did actually touch on this briefly on my recent appearance on Matchpoint Canada, the tennis podcast, so I'll link my appearance in the description. Serena has been dominant for a very long period of time, but historically she's tended to play her best when she has something to prove. And sometimes that has tied in with when she's had a lengthy break. She won Wimbledon in 2003 and didn't play again until 2004 Miami Open, which she won, a premier mandatory event. We can look also at the 2007 Australian Open. By her own admission, she was out of shape and out of form at that tournament, hadn't played much in the preceding months, and she still managed to get her way to the trophy. A motivated and hungry Serena Williams is a dangerous Serena Williams, and given that she is still one Grand Slam away from tying Margaret Court's all-time record, it's fair to say that she's still hungry. However, and there is a however, prior to this break, I was getting the feeling that Serena needed more match play, not less. And that's not something that I would have said in recent years as the players who've dominated for some time age. I think it is important for them to schedule smartly, to think about when they're playing and when they're resting, just so that they can peak for those big events. And I think Serena has been smart, she has been dialed in, she has known where she wants to excel. She's not bothered about a world #1 ranking anymore, as her current ranking of 9 shows. She's in it to win the majors, that's all that matters to her. But I think recently that's got a bit extreme and she's not able to peak the way she wants to at the back end of those majors because she's not getting in match play that will settle her for those occasions. People focus on the fact that she has lost her last 4 Grand Slam finals, not that she's made it there in the first place. Her recent struggles have not been physical. She's had very little problem getting to those final stages and she can still deal with most players that come her way. The root of her recent struggles, in my opinion, is the mentality. And that's a crazy thing to say because she was the queen of comebacks at one stage. She had a rock-hard mentality, particularly at the back end of majors, but most recently with her loss to Bianca Andreescu in last year's US Open final, her loss to Simona Halep in the Wimbledon final, 2 very similar matches. Serena was so tensed up that she couldn't find her first serve on a regular basis. Halep and Andreescu were both able to move her around, and they were able to do that because Serena was not bringing her first strike tennis. She wasn't able to get that big bomb of a first serve in to get herself out of difficult situations or to set herself up to dictate the point. Which brings me to the point of why I felt she needed more match play, because whatever level you're competing at, I think it was important for Serena to get to those stages in tournaments where she wasn't at a Grand Slam, but she was in a final and she was managing the emotional, nervy side of that situation. So before I sidetrack too much, I did feel at first that this break was not going to be a positive thing for Serena because she needed more time on the match court and not less. However, Serena herself has said that she feels this time will benefit her, that her body needs it. So time will tell, and certain aspects of her situation I feel hold similarities to a certain Roger Federer, who I will move on to now. Federer, also 38, as is Serena, and 20 Grand Slam titles to her 23. I mean, it's pretty obvious to everyone that at the beginning of this break, there was no harm done to Federer because he had miraculously timed his latest surgery to perfection. Literally just had it a few weeks prior to coronavirus shutdown being announced. It's a bit more concise for Federer. At this point in time, he would only just be coming back from injury now if he was to be coming back at all within the next couple of months. So Federer so far really hasn't been affected. And last time he had a knee surgery, we know exactly what happened. He took the last half of 2016 off, so 6 months, came back at the beginning of 2017 and had a phenomenal comeback year, winning 2 Grand Slam titles. A relaxed Federer is a dangerous Federer. A Federer who is swinging freely is a tough man to come up against, as was shown in matches against Tennis Sandgren and John Millman at the Australian Open when he came back from the brink. And I think the same thing can be said of Federer and Serena, that based on recent results and performances, there is no reason to doubt their physical ability, because both have routinely been going to the back end of major tournaments. It was only Wimbledon last year that Federer twice had championship point in a tough match, and I'm sorry to bring that up because I know it's a touchy subject. So for Federer and Serena, no reason at all to doubt their physical ability based on what we've seen. But while you don't have to consider their age in relation to their performances, I think you have to consider it and look at where they are in their careers and how time might affect them, because they're going to be getting on for 40 by the time the tennis tour returns. Wimbledon is off, US Open is looking incredibly uncertain, and French Open doesn't have a great shot either. So there are 3 slams there, 3 shots at slams that they will not get at the back end of their careers, where they are, without argument, in Grand Slam winning form, and things are unpredictable. We don't know how long that will last, so they are 3 opportunities that they won't get back. And for Federer particularly, who has Nadal and Djokovic nipping at his heels, that is something that could have big implications for the history books. So for both of these two, it's going to work one of 2 ways. Either this break gives them the energy and the replenishment that they need to keep going for maybe an extra season more than they originally could have done, or they are going to have spent too long away from the rigors of tour and struggle to readjust and to get back into the swing of not just the competing but the travelling and the demands of the tour that they have been able to cope with for so long. But at some point, it's something that age will factor in. So that's where I stand on those 2. Rafael Nadal, age 34 just, and 19 Grand Slam titles. This one's going to be very quick. I don't really have much to say here, it kind of speaks for itself. Despite the fact he won 2 Grand Slams last season at the French Open and the US Open, I do think that Nadal has been slightly underrated really the past couple of years, which I know that's going to sound ridiculous because he is a member of the big 3 and these guys get praised and talked up all the time. But you know, I don't think the way he's competed consistently across the calendar years, across all 3 surfaces, I don't think that's been appreciated as much as it could have been. This is a guy that some people used to say couldn't play off clay. People used to underrate him on hard courts, play him down on grass courts, not really give him a shot at Wimbledon recently. And he has just consistently brought it across every single surface. And yes, he looked a bit limp at times during his loss to Dominic Thiem at the Australian Open in January, but Thiem's in stunning form, and Nadal played like a lion for the few months preceding that. So before I wax lyrical, based on his form of the last 2 years, based on his form since 2016 really, no reason to doubt that Nadal will just pick up where he left off. Yes, he might be a little bit rusty when things get going again, but won't everybody be? I'm pretty sure that if the top guys are struggling, the guys further down will be struggling as well. A very key reason that I'm not concerned about Nadal is the amount of times he's been sidelined during his career. This is a guy that's been through it all with injury and has been set back for months at a time, and therefore this disruption isn't unusual for him. This is something that he's experienced before and something that I've no doubt he will take in his stride. With all these new shows and Instagram lives and things that are appearing online, it's quite difficult for me to keep on top of everything people are saying, but the bits I've heard from Nadal, he seems super relaxed, very laid back, just taking everything as it comes. And I saw recently that he's not even in a hurry or having much desire to play the US Open in September if it was a possibility. I remember a few weeks after the lockdown, the halting of the tour had begun, he said that he hadn't picked up a racket since Indian Wells. So that tells you a bit about his mindset and how unconcerned he is right now. And to be fair, he has no reason to be concerned based on everything we've seen, so that's Nadal. Okay then, Novak Djokovic, age 33 and 17 Grand Slam titles now, which is weird because Federer was on that number for so long, it's almost like he owns it now. This is starting to get a bit repetitive, but for Djokovic as well, you know, based on recent form, it's difficult to see him getting thrown too much by this break, particularly because I think Djokovic is in quite a privileged position that people might overlook. He is several several years younger than Federer, a year younger than Nadal, and he has always had something to aim for, while Federer and Nadal to an extent have been setting the standard and placing the bar higher. Djokovic has always known what he's up against, and he's always had that fire to keep driving him to achieve more. I think it's easier mentally to be chasing something than to be setting the standard yourself and then trying to maintain your own lead, because I think that brings more tenseness than trying to overlap someone. To use an example, just so I'm not talking baselessly, a few weeks ago, me and some of my younger siblings were doing this challenge where we would race a certain distance and see how quickly we could do it, and I was the first to go, and I set the starting time of 22 seconds. My younger brother then beat that time, so the next time I ran, I shaved 3 seconds off my time because suddenly I had something to aim for. And I do feel like this is the case in tennis, where the player who is behind and who's got something to try and beat, they're in a bit of an easier position. So I find it difficult to see this break really messing with Djokovic long term. He's become a bit of a mental machine, really, and particularly as he's younger than the other players that we've already mentioned. But once again, this could affect him numbers-wise, because with his demeanour and his results at the beginning of the year, he hadn't lost yet, you did get the feeling that he was gunning for a career-best season. He had that little joke in Dubai about not planning to lose all season, except it kind of wasn't a joke, he was basically serious. So he was looking for an all-time best year, and really, if you look at the whole scenario, other players and contenders, and the matches he'd already come through, there was nothing to suggest that it couldn't be a career best season for him, but that's been struck off the cards now. Also, he would have had a strong shot at Wimbledon, which he won last year, and the US Open, which would have taken him to 19 Grand Slams, which is Nadal's current total. But Wimbledon's not getting played, the US Open looks unlikely, and honestly, out of the 3 Grand Slams in the back end of the year, the French Open, because of its sneaky change of place in the calendar, that looks the tournament most likely to take place. And we all know who's the favourite there, so it could go from Djokovic looking likely to draw even closer to Nadal and Federer. It could go from that to Nadal playing and winning the French Open this year, and Nadal equaling Federer on 20 slams, and Djokovic trailing behind at 17. So in that respect, this break could have an impact. To summarise, as long as we get tennis back for 2021, I don't really see any of Federer, Nadal and Djokovic, and probably not Serena either, getting knocked off their stride, and they are definitely hurt more numbers-wise as opposed to having their rhythm disrupted. And 2 groups of players to mention just quickly as we close. The first of these, the next generation, the younger up-and-coming players. I feel like a lot of people asking this question, what does this mean for Serena, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, etc., might have been thinking that because of their age, this is more of a big deal for them, they're at the back ends of their careers. But actually, I personally feel this break might be more difficult for some of the younger players because they lack the experience. A lot of them haven't been around long enough to have experienced layoffs with injury, to have had disruptions to their rhythm, and the life of a tennis player does become a rhythm, it becomes a routine. You travel, you play a tournament, you lose or you win, and then you move on to the next one. Now, I think this will be more of an issue for the players on the men's side, because on the WTA, we've seen it's easier to break through, and a lot of the younger players, the next-gen players, are already the players to beat. Bianca Andreescu, Naomi Osaka, Belinda Bencic, etc. And Andreescu achieved the best results of her career while battling through injury, so she's had experience with that and she should be fine. And just to note, I'm not grouping Dominic Thiem in with the next gen because he's well into his 20s by now. He's reached 3 Grand Slam finals in the past 2 years. He is closing the gap on the big 3, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of consistency. So I'd definitely be putting him more in a group with them as opposed to the younger guys. The likes of Alexander Zverev, Stefanos Tsitsipas, etc. We're really going to see what they're made of now. Zverev had just made his Grand Slam breakthrough, reaching the Australian Open semis. Tsitsipas won the ATP finals end of last year. Andrei Rublev, another young player, had just started a brilliant streak, and on the women's side, Elena Rybakina has been halted as well. So for them, as they were just getting their first moves going, this is more of an issue. So that's just something interesting to keep an eye on, and something that some people may not have considered, that even though these players are young and have a lot of years ahead of them, it might be difficult for them in the early stages of coming back. And finally, players from small tennis nations are going to find this quite difficult. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of different nations individually starting their own unofficial tournaments to give their players match play. If anyone's been watching my talk show series on the channel, I recently had Simon Carr, the Irish #1, on the channel, and he was talking about how he's one of 3 ranked players in Ireland, and he's the top ranked there by a couple of hundred ranking spots, if not more. They don't have the numbers to be able to stage that kind of event. They don't have the quality of opposition to keep their top players in fit match play conditions. So players from smaller countries that don't have the privilege of places like Great Britain, they're going to be at a disadvantage ahead of the tour coming back. So there are my thoughts on how this break might affect certain players. Do leave a comment and let me know if you agree or disagree and why that's the case. I have a little reminder here. Remember 2,500 subscribers. We are approximately 50 subscribers off that big 2,500 number, and my predictive powers tell me that there will be at least 50 people who aren't subscribed to this channel that will be watching this video. Not really my predictive powers. My stats tell me that. I look at my stats and it says that X number of you are not subscribed but are still watching the videos, so what are you doing here? So if you have enjoyed this video and you are not yet subscribed, please subscribe to the channel so that you can stay updated, and hit that little notifications bell. Check out the talk show series. I have another talk show episode coming this week, so stay tuned for that. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.